to this. This is going to be a little haphazard here as we get running.
Is it possible to tag my YouTube? I don't know if that's a thing, because like my YouTube has like, I don't know, like 3,500 subscribers or something.
Oh yeah.
I think you should be able to.
It's just the music of Josh Cohen as like the YouTube
The
channel.
music of Josh Cohen.
Right. I thought about calling it like the music of Marcus Miller, but then I was like, well, that's already taken.
It's already taken.
He might be a little upset about that.
Stream your. How do I share? How do I share? We are going right now.
Right, so that's it.
But I don't know how to fucking. I don't know how to share this stuff.
Oh yeah, Josh Cohen live. There you go.
Do you see it?
I see it on our thing. I can edit the video.
Can you just copy a link to it?
Yeah. It's unlisted for some reason.
Oh, maybe that. Oh.
Let me see. Chat. I put it in the chat. And
unlisted.
Fucking nightmare. I put it in the chat, but what was I gonna say?
Thanks. Okay.
You want us to tag your YouTube on the whatever
description
video or on the actual description of the thing, because I can do that right now.
Yeah, whatever you think is going to be the most effective. I mean, I don't know if it really will notify any subscribers, but
yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, it's like youtube.com/user/the music of Josh Cohen. So now, if I put this on, here we go.
Of Josh Cohen.
Oh, so your YouTube thing doesn't actually say, like in the video title, it doesn't say the music guy. Is that
in
YouTube? It just says 39 Josh.
Yeah,
Cohen,
that's the one.
5.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. All right.
So that's the way you guys do it. That actually might be better to change that in the future, though. Like I'll edit it afterwards, like the names.
Yeah.
Just because, like for looking stuff up.
Right.
Like SEO, I believe is what they call it.
All right. Now we should be back. Everybody just saw my Chrome window. Whoever's watching. Dude, streaming is hard.
Don't put your credit card on it.
Yeah, I know, for real. Okay, so this is
I'm just sharing the link on Facebook. I'll just put on my.
That's great, man. Even if we get like a couple of viewers, it's not the thing we really want is the audio, anyways. Cool. Okay, let's jump into it. It's already fucking 11 o'clock. So when do we have to finish by?
I gotta get out of here by like just like pretty much 1 o'clock.
Okay. Oh, that's a good amount of time then. Yeah.
I'm just gonna pull up a chat link.
All right. My sharing is not going to be the most thoughtful way of sharing, but it is being shared.
It's shared.
Yeah, it's more about the audio at the end of the day. So this is great.
The end of the day.
So just so I introduce you properly, what's the title of your new record?
It's called Freedom.
Freedom. All right. Yeah. And you're a bassist, you're a music teacher, you're a what titles can I give you on the intro?
I'm a composer, I'm a bass player, I'm an educator, and all around good guy. At least I try to be.
Great. Love it. Okay, so all we got to do now is sync up our mic.
Yeah, we got to
sync up our mics for the post. So I'm gonna hit everybody. Make sure you're recording audio on your own ends there, and I'm just gonna get you to clap into the microphone. So is everybody rolling?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, now just a second here.
Okay. Why is my voice hurt? The worst. Ugh.
Okay, Josh, do you want to clap into yours?
Yep.
Just like right into your mic, like super.
Oh, and in yours, I was doing it into my Zoom that I'm sending you. Okay.
Thanks. Actually, that's good to have it in both. Okay, and Michael? I think that was good. One more time. Perfect. Okay. Title music's coming. Let's make a podcast, boys. Yeah. What's up? Welcome back to another episode of the Music Guy Podcast, the podcast about a couple of working musicians in the Toronto, Ontario area. My name is Al Rowe. I'm one of your hosts. I'm a music guy. I write songs, I sing, I play guitar, I make records, I teach on Zoom, I make podcasts and stuff like that. They're broadcasting to you from the heart of Liberty Village in downtown Toronto, where it's cooled off a little bit. It's a little bit more of a breezy day here, not too humid. So you know what? It's not bad. And my partner in crime, co-host, coming at you from Whitby, Ontario, is Mr. Michael Hebbs. How's it going, my friend?
You know, it's going. I guess it's cool. I haven't been outside today, so I wouldn't know.
Right. Well, that's okay. That's good, actually. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
I mean, masks, that's the thing, you know, we're supposed to, can't you go outside with masks?
Yeah.
Cool
But
with that now?
I think people
3 cases in Ontario.
I think people forget that despite, you know, all the precautions that are in place and the measures that have been taken, you're still supposed to be staying, you know, away from other people if you can. So we're in a bit of a weird place in time right now. But anyways, that's a different discussion. I want to introduce everybody to our special guest this week, all the way from Madison, Wisconsin. A friend of mine and a friend of Mike's for many, many years when he used to live in Toronto and be part of the music scene here. Yeah. Very, instrumental in my career development. I'm sure Mike would say the same. He is a bassist, a composer, an educator, all-around great dude.
Actually, all-around nice guy, I believe was the term.
All-around nice guy, all-around good guy. Our friend and yours, Mr. Josh Cohen.
Thank you for having me on the Music Guy podcast. Loving what you guys are doing.
Dude,
this is a great opportunity.
It's been a long time coming, man. I'm almost certain that when Mike and I were first talking about doing this episode or doing a podcast at all, your name came up. It's like, we have so many cool people we could interview, like Josh Cohen and, X and Y and Z. And it was just like, so, we're 39 episodes in and finally we've got you on here. So you've got a record coming out. Kind of buried the headline here. The release date is August 14th, you said?
21st.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, completely wrong. I can't pull my notes up because it's going to mess up the live stream.
I'll pull the notes up.
So August 24th.
We've got a really professional business here we're running, and it's running really smoothly.
So the record's called Freedom. That much I do know. It's a solo bass album. Haven't had the pleasure of hearing it yet because it's not yet released. But it's also coming with a transcription book that you've written that's literally like a note for note. Here's what I played and how to play all the songs. Is it notation, tabulature, a mixture of both?
Yeah.
Tabulature, I like that.
Yeah, well, okay, so this is a physical copy of the CD for all that can see on YouTube Live.
Excellent.
The artwork was done by a friend of mine, Joff Jones. He does a lot of street art, like he sells his art on the street in Santa Cruz, California, and travels around, kind of like what I've been doing for many years.
Yeah.
And he did this really psychedelic art there.
Yeah,
and then
that's
the transcription book. It comes with like performance notes. So I think I spent a lot of time doing like just performance notes about each piece, what to look out for, just like a few kind of things. And the way it is I mean, pretty much most of the book is double staff, like a grand staff, almost like piano.
Mm-hmm.
And then one staff of tablature. And the tablature, I took out all, like sometimes you have tablature and it's got like slurs in it and it's got all kinds of information. I left all that to the notation, and the tablature is just like, hey, what frets are you using?
Right.
You go to the tablature for the frets, but you don't go there to see the rhythms and all that kind of stuff.
That's a clean way of doing it.
Kind of frowned upon. You know what I mean?
Right. It is. But you know what? Like, I think like in some ways, like the more complex an arrangement becomes, it almost becomes, especially like in terms of learning, it becomes so critical. And then 100%. It's also like, as you guys are both guitar players, you'll know that the tone, like the way, like it's like, yeah, you could play that phrase on, the G and B string, like close to, maybe second or third position. But that's like, if you play it using the D and G string and you play it up the guitar, it has a fatter tone. It's different. So then it's like, so it isn't just about the notes. It can be about where you play it. And it's cool. Like it's one of those unique things about string instruments.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of like the patterns too, like guitar and bass are so pattern based that oftentimes if I'm learning a solo or something on guitar, like I want to know where on the neck they're playing it, because I want to know sort of, moving from phrase to phrase, why they maybe chose those notes, because they know, the player knows like, oh, here's this area is really great for this key, and this chord progression and stuff like that. It's like if I'm lifting it by ear or reading a tab and the fingering is really awkward, but the notes are all correct. It's like, is this really how they're playing it? Because then you can't get the inflections the same way with bends. And if you're doing like double stop bends and stuff, sometimes it's like you really want to know where on the neck. And guitar just reads better in tab anyways. And I think that is true for bass oftentimes as well. Whereas,
yeah, I mean, it's like, it's interesting. Like I certainly, I'm not a huge advocate to like in teaching, like to keep a student on only tabs.
Yes.
So what I've been doing, I do a lot of teaching, is I give my beginner students tabs and notation. They always see the notation as well. And then I wean them off the tabs. And then I like eventually I give them something. I say, you don't have the tabs this time. And sometimes I'll include like blank tabs, and I'm like, you could write them in and figure them out.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great idea.
Right. And then another thing is I do these like fill-in assignments, which is like, it's so easy to just teach your students. I heard you had Dave Kirby on before, and you're talking about, teaching style. And it's so easy to be like, oh, you want to learn that song? Okay, here's this song. Okay, here's the next song.
Oh my God, I'm so guilty of that.
So one thing I do is, I'll transcribe a lot of music for them, but then eventually I do these things where I transcribe the form and I transcribe a little bit. I transcribe it all, but I don't give it to them. I give them like all these, measures missing, and I say, you write in the rest. And so they're not like staring at a blank page, because a lot of times they don't know how to deal with form and all these kinds of things. So it's sort of like a way of saying, hey, you got to put in that extra work yourself, and you can do it. Like I know you can. So
that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been working.
Right
on,
dude.
It's a way of getting them to do ear training, being like, hey, if you want to be one of those players, then you're going to learn how to have a really good ear.
Well, it's interesting because
you can learn it. You can learn it,
On like a recent episode with our guest RJ from up here in Toronto, he was saying,
the trombonist.
Yeah. You guys know each other.
And he's a bass player too.
Yeah, and guitar.
I did not know that.
And teaches a bunch. And he said he was very outspoken about the fact that he feels the emphasis on reading music notation can be really damaging to a student's progress where he wants to sort of get somebody in the lesson and get them to start learning by ear as soon as
Right.
possible. And I'm not saying you can't do that in concert with teaching them how to read, because I think that is an important skill as well. But you know, if
The other thing is like, you know, there's so much emphasis, especially in a lot of classical training, so much emphasis on reading, but why not writing at the same time? It's like, you know, when you're learning to read, when you're a child, like read English or whatever language you grow up with. I mean, you're learning to write your name. You're learning to write at the same time, and it's like, how many students, you know, the all they've done is, you know, draw a couple chord notes and a couple clefs, but then they're reading, you know, 2 or 3 pages of music. So that's the other thing is like, it's you got to like teach them both. It's like, and if you want to learn how to, you know, read rhythms, I mean, like in my own learning, I think I got a copy of Sibelius, like notation software, and I think I had it only about a couple years into like learning how to play and read music, and you know, I had trouble reading rhythms and like understanding, you know, why this rhythm is such and such way, but I, you know, be able to hear it. And then I would just know what I want. And then through experimenting with Sibelius, which has that playback function, I'd be like, no, that's not the rhythm. And then eventually you get it, and then you remember. But it was that
Internalize it
process. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes what's weird is sometimes I could read the rhythm, but I wouldn't know how to create it out of thin air and write it down.
yeah.
And it's also, you know, I don't know if you've ever had that experience of reading someone's, like, even like really professional, like working musicians, and then reading some of their like charts. Some, you know, a lot of people do like, you know, just like quick, you know, charts with not like, you know, all the form,
Super
just what
detailed.
they,
Yeah.
yeah.
Little
And I've
details.
had a few gigs where I've done that, and the like
Oh,
very classic thing is like that is rhythms that are written that aren't actually correct.
sure.
Sure.
But it works because it's just for them, it just triggers their memory, and so yeah, that's, you know, all part of that.
Yeah,
that
writing.
puzzle,
I mean,
you know?
writing rhythmic stuff for, especially for pop music and like funk and jazz or whatever. I mean, so much of this stuff is just kind of felt and not really. Nobody's really was thinking about like, how do you write this when we, you know, wrote the song or when we were jamming or whatever. It's a lot of visceral sort of stuff. So I think it's all valid, right? Like I give my students a tab, but underneath the tab, I've got it sort of organized where I can say, you know, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and underneath the tab, so that at least all the frets line up, or, you know, 16th note subdivisions if that's what we need. At least all those notes line up to a beat on the quote unquote grid, so they can, once they develop that skill of learning how to count and play and where things fall, they can utilize that to understand where the rhythms are. But I think I don't.
So it's so crazy. There seems to be like all these different philosophies about counting. You know, I've seen some people advocating like don't count, and some people are like, no, learn to count everything. And you know, I've been trying that myself, and with students is just like I say I should be able to count, maybe not up to speed. Like if it's like, you know, a really fast broken 16th note phrase,
Yeah.
I'm not always looking to be able, I just want to like be able to count at a practice tempo,
Yeah.
and just to try to lock, just for awareness of the pulse. I think that's like, I think it's important, but yeah, it's not like it's the only way. It's also one of those things where, you know, sometimes there'll be someone that just seems to be like really rhythmically inclined, and, you know, you could say talent. I know you guys had an episode and you were trying to discuss, does genius exist or does talent exist?
Yeah.
It does. Josh Cohen.
Yeah. Here's an example right here. Yeah.
Well, the thing is like, I think there's always a brute force way to get you there. I mean, at least, you know, if you are of reasonable, like average intelligence, all your mental faculties are working, normally. I think even for these things that you might feel like you don't have a knack at doing, there's always like some analytical, like brute force, getting in the weeds way of getting you there.
Mm-hmm.
And then and at the end of the day, your skill set will be indistinguishable from someone that maybe got there naturally. So I think there are plenty of players that maybe haven't taken that approach to something like rhythm, but I think even someone that struggles with it, I think there's always that way of just saying, okay, so you got this complex 2-bar thing or whatever. Well, let's master the first beat. Okay, let's master the second beat.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put them together, and then just brick by brick. You don't build the house in one day. You lay a really strong foundation, and I think learning is a lot like that. And I think I don't know if you guys have experience. It's funny how we just kind of went into education, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you've sort of experienced this, where I think one thing that is severely lacking in music education, and this is only from my own experience, and then also talking to others and what they studied, and even at the university level, is learning how to practice.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right? I feel like there should be a class on it, and I think there's
Yep.
I think there's probably, there's dozens or more, like even just categories of ways to practice, like learning strategies, basically. But they're not taught. It's just so often that you might get about 5% of like teaching someone how to practice, and then 95% of, okay, be able to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just do it till you're good.
Right. And so have you had that experience with students where maybe you get like a bonus lesson or something happens where, you've covered what you need to cover, but somehow you get some extra time where you just almost practice with them, and you're like turn like a half an hour into a practice session. And then it's always like, they're like this thing that they thought they couldn't do, that they thought they had, some detriment that was making it so they could never do such and such thing. You show them the light at the end of the tunnel, and you show them, no, this is how you practice. And I think it's missing. I think it's probably the most valuable lesson, because even if you were getting music lessons every day, that's not going to make you a professional musician. It's how do you acquire these skills even more on your own, and then of course real world experience, doing.
Yeah.
It's studying and then it's doing.
I have done that a lot, actually, and I agree with you. I think it's super valuable for the little ones, for the kids that are just getting started. I have a number of students that are probably like under the age of 10. The ones that are doing well and have the capacity to go that extra step. I always try to impress on them early. It's like, I want you to learn this song. If it's just 4-bar little thing in their beginner book or whatever, I want you to be able to play it. I want you to be able to play it while you're saying what the letters are of each note, and I want you to be able to play it while you're counting the beats. And that, I think, starts them on a path of like, I'm not just, because kids just want to blast through, especially if they're kind of good, they just want to blast through a piece as quickly as possible. So at least that gets them on the train of like, there's more going on here than just what the notes on the page are. There's context. There's other sort of things you want to be thinking about. And then for my older students, I try to, I mean, the one practice technique that I always go over with my older students is like, here's how you can learn a difficult line or piece or whatever in less time. And my process is always, and this is what I do myself, take it down to like a brutally slow tempo, like half speed, third speed, where it's actually hard to not rush it, and then play through that trying your hardest to not rush it, trying to be right on with the metronome. And this is practicing with a metronome, by the way. And then
Right.
and then when you've got it, if you can play it, set a goal for yourself. It's like, okay, I can play it 5 times without messing it up. I can play it 10 times without messing it up, whatever. Bump it up 10 BPM or 5 BPM, or sort of depends on what tempo we're using to start with, and the speed of the line. But say 5 BPM, do it again 5 times. Feel good, move it
Right.
up 5. And you don't feel the speed increase. And what's remarkable is that sounds like a lot of work, right? It's like, so by the end of the exercise, you've played this line like 100 times, let's say. But you can do that in 15 minutes if you're focused and if you're going through that process. And one of the problems that I have when I practice is my brain is just all over the place and I can't stay. I just want to be good. So I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to play this up to speed. And then it's just like, yeah, this obviously isn't. And if I slow down and I say, no, let's just go through the process. Okay, let's cut tempo in half. It's 120. Let's go down to 60. Let's get it there.
Right.
65, 70, 75. And there's almost like a meditative quality to it.
Yeah.
And you just get in the zone. And then obviously my brain can't handle it after 15, 20 minutes. I'm going to lose focus. That's okay. Take a break, come back to it. But in that 15 minutes, you now have the ability to play this line up to speed that you didn't before. And instead of just like, just firing in whatever direction and just blindly trying to play something, if you apply a process to it, you can get it done faster. And that's what I try to impress on some of my more advanced students. Do you have any like specific like how to practice techniques, Josh, that you use
Well,
with
it's
people?
like everything you were saying. It's just like it's so much of a relief to talk to other musicians about these, because so often like other people in our lives that aren't invested in music, they don't understand the process at this micro level. But yeah, no, I agree with all that. The 5 times game or the 10 times game, basically turn into a game. And I'm a huge advocate for with like there's different levels of that. So if you're doing like the 5 times game, you can call it, where you do it 5 times correctly in a row, and if you make a mistake, you go back to 0.
Yeah, that's hardcore.
It's like you're back to 0.
That's hardcore. But yes.
And then the idea is like you can do it like depending on what the kind of the issue is. If it's just getting the fingerings and notes, sometimes you can be like, we're gonna do 5 times in a row, but like we're not gonna worry about time. Then once we do that, then we're gonna put time back in.
Sure.
And then work with a metronome or counting. Sometimes it could just be really valuable just to do the counting, and then some days and not do a metronome. I'll go through periods of time where I'll do like lots of metronome and all kinds of funky things, like the metronome only on beat 4, or like weird things like that. But then I'll go like a month or 2 with just doing like counting stuff and not worrying about getting the technology involved. So yeah, it's like there's all these things. And then, ear training. I'm really just trying to push ear training. And a lot of times, the ear training stuff and like what we hear is often a little bit behind what we're able to physically play, at least for a lot of players.
Yes.
But I always just try to press on them. So, if you're going through like jazz standards are just such a great way of like studying harmony and stuff. And like, so if I'm having students like arpeggiate chords over a jazz standard, I might have them do ear training, which is just isolated of just working on those chords and, one root note, even though they're kind of playing something that's above, but it just depends on the students. And, like people who have like a lot of experience singing, even at amateur level, but just kind of took it seriously in a way. A lot of times they'll have a leg up with like things like ear training.
Yeah, for sure.
So
with with the practicing thing, have you guys ever done the thing? I learned this from Guthrie Govan, where instead of practicing slow, you practice less notes. So if it's a really quick line, you go at a quicker tempo, but you only do 3 notes, and then you try 4 notes.
Oh yeah, I've heard about. I started doing that recently, and I think Yeah, is
It
that like
helps.
come from like violinists or
Shredders.
something where that comes from originally? I don't know.
I have no idea. I learned it from the Guthrie Govan guy, and he's like a shredder and all that stuff.
Right.
And I guess the theory is like, so if I was working on alternate picking, if I'm going at 40 beats per minute, I can take really big, sort of wide strokes, and it doesn't matter, right? But if I'm going at 160 beats per minute to get those
Can't.
two notes, I can't. You know,
Right.
so it's like it's interesting. It's kind of like the flip side of that. You
I've
know,
heard, yeah, I've heard people talking about that. I've heard people like calling it like Twitch, working on your Twitch or something, or and then I've heard like classical pianists, some of them call it grouping, and they work
Mm,
on it's like take 4 notes and make those 4 notes into one motion. I mean, really, there's
sure.
4 motions going, but you kind of think of it as one, and there's larger movements. It's like your fingers are actually doing 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
but your arm and your wrist is going to go one.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
I think that same kind of thing exists for guitar and bass and other string instruments. The one thing is like with piano, when you have this idea of the concert pianist and all this like exceptionally complex like solo piano repertoire, I think the pedagogy has then sort of like taking that as being like this is like the pinnacle level of piano playing, and how do we get someone to that level? And I don't think that kind of thing has happened to the same degree with some of the other, especially the electric string instruments. So I don't think
Yeah.
they've been aware of some of the physical things. And there's a lot of potentially negative pedagogical approaches that were used in piano and sometimes still are, and are also used in guitar and bass. And
Oh,
it's a
there's
lot
tons
of the
of conflicting things like, oh, you got to hold your pick like this, or you hold it like that. You know what I mean? And it's like,
right.
I remember one of my students that I went to, he had auditioned for U of T, and the professor was like, oh, you got to hold your pick like this. And I'm like, I've never heard that before. In fact, I've heard the opposite from like 10 or 12 people.
Right. So you got to
Uh,
be like so careful. Have
yeah,
you heard about like there could be a lot of negative outcomes from like isolation.
it's isolation.
So this idea of literally isolating and only moving one tiny muscle, like that can lead to repetitive stress injury. And I actually
Ah,
had, which finger was it now? Oh yeah, it was this. So like a little micro tear in a ligament. Like they never
yeah,
X-rated it, but so I took a
figured it.
little bit of therapy. I had to work on it, and it's hard to say what caused it. But basically, this idea of just saying my arm is going to be completely still, and I'm literally only going to move my third finger or something like that
Oh,
is
yeah.
actually really bad for you.
Yeah, I was
Really
working on
bad.
something like that with around the time that I did have my injury, where I would do like the chromatic, thing, and I'd be like, okay, this finger moves, and those fingers aren't allowed to, so they'd shoot up, and I'd put them back into place, and I
Right.
would like be really stiff during that because I was so focused on them not moving. So yeah, no,
Right. Was
Oh,
this
that's
the
really
spider?
interesting.
Was this the spider crawl thing?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So here's the thing. So like I've been teaching some of my students the spider crawl, but I
like,
do it with like a caveat or spider walk. I say
yeah,
I want you to learn this, but just a little bit, just so you have like some sense of control of where your
yeah,
fingers would be. But I don't like. I want you to then like just do a little bit, and then remember that also that relaxed, like fluid approach where once you play one finger, your other fingers and everything else can just kind of relax and be neutral. They don't
Mm,
have to be
yeah,
working. That's the idea. Because the idea of just keeping your fingers, um,
right above the frets.
yeah,
Yeah,
like actually,
perfect.
there's
Yeah.
actually there's a great book. I don't remember the author. It's called like What Every Pianist Needs to Know About the Body. Um, and a friend, recommend that to me, and I learned some great things about it. One thing is, so the position that your hand is in, I could stand up. It's kind of funny on YouTube, but I'll do it. So um, like when you're walking and your like arms are kind of like hanging to your sides, Homo sapiens, like we have like a natural curve that our fingers kind of go in. And it might be a little bit different for everyone, but that's technically the neutral position. So me, it looks like this, right? So it's not curved like that. It's actually like for me, they're extended beyond the thumb. And so we should remember that's the actual neutral position. It's not this. It's not this. It's that position where no work is happening. The work is completely not happening at all. And then think about that when you approach your instrument. It's like, what is that position like when I just put it down on the instrument? And then you say, that's my neutral. Everything should be moving from that point, whenever possible.
That's resting position.
Yeah.
That's such.
Or else you're working in the opposite direction.
That makes sense.
No, that's so great. And you know what? I've taught some beginner piano stuff, and I'm not a piano expert by any means, but I'm just going through a book with somebody, and okay, here's an exercise where like you play, the first 5 notes in the C major scale all at the same time. So C, D, E, F, G. You play them all with one hand at the same time, and then lift up just your thumb and play C, and then lift up just your index and play D, and it's like that is useful because you run into students who they're half their hand is like pointing up towards the ceiling when they're playing a single note or whatever. But you're so right though, there does need to be that fluid motion. And now that I think of it, it's like now that you brought that up, I've never really considered that, but you're right. I think that can be super damaging, right?
Yeah. And like from this book, like one of the lines I remember, and this is almost like ideology in a way. It's just like you don't play piano with your fingers, you play with your body. And that's with every instrument. You play it with your body. And that means like you're playing the bass, and it's not just about my fingers. My shoulder is part of it. If my shoulder is locked, that would be bad. And then we have to remember there's this concept of body mapping, and we like a lot of people body map incorrectly.
What does that mean?
So like in our brain, there's like a schematic of our body, like, oh, my arm's over here, and there's something called this is a fun thing. So the proprioceptive abilities, right? So it's this idea that without looking and using your eyes, where parts of your body are. So if you close your eyes and I say, touch your nose, do it slowly with your index finger.
That sounded so sexual.
Right. But, you can try if you want to try it, Mike, you close your eyes and you're going to be able to do it. And that's because of proprioception, and so we have this ability of mapping things, but we map things incorrectly a lot of times. So a lot of people will map their arms as starting at the shoulders, but the arms start at the clavicles right here. This is where your arm starts, right in your collarbone, where the collarbone meets, right? That's where the movement is. And if we're thinking of it as this,
from the shoulder,
even a little bit, that means when we're playing our instruments, something that we do repetitively, and when it's repetitively, it increases the chance of injury. It's not just something we do once in a while, where you could have bad technique and get away with it.
And take a break if you need to.
Exactly, or I just need a break. Right.
That'd be crazy.
And so what happens is, if you're mapping incorrectly, then all the muscles in here are working to keep this still. And I'm just doing that, and it feels uncomfortable. So this book was just full of examples like that. And then also the proprioception idea got me thinking, and I realized, you've heard of this idea of like finger substitution? Pianists talk about it all the time. Not. We'll say it's a shift.
Okay.
Like on the guitar or the bass.
Okay, yeah.
We'll say shifting.
Position shift, yeah.
We don't realize. So I do an exercise with my students, and I could do this even with like students that are only been playing for about 6 or 7 months, or whatever. And so I have them, they put their 4 fingers down on the fretboard, and I say, replace your pinky finger with your index. So replace your 4 with your 1.
Okay? Yeah.
And so you play the pinky, then you do the 4 with your 1. Okay. Then I say, now do it without looking. Almost everyone can do it, right? Because they have a sense of where that finger is.
Sure.
And then I say, okay, then replace the 1 with the 4, and then play the new 4 of where that 4 would be. And then I get it to go until they're moving all over the neck. They've moved many positions, but then I start saying, do the middle steps in your head. So first you do one middle step in your head, and if you don't actually play one of the fingers, then you do a clean shift. And if you take away 2 or 3 middle steps, but you still actually do them in your head,
you visualize in your head where the pinky would be.
Right. And when
I see.
And in terms of like a meditative process where you're just really focused, you can get to the point where without looking, you're making a shift of, a minor 6, an octave even without looking.
Okay. So you could move, for example, from like 1st fret to 7th fret without looking.
Without looking, just by using this concept of proprioception.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, and
it happens with all the like the solo bass stuff. Like everything is like counterintuitive. It's like a puzzle because it's like you got these 6 strings, and I'm like, all right, I want like a bass line, I want percussion, I want a melody, I want some chords, and there's always that like there's not always a reliance on set patterns that we're used to playing.
Yeah,
There'll be weird intricacies that'll happen, and then there'll also be just like a lot of like shifts that like instead of just being able to go like here, you're just going to be like, So it became increasingly important for me, but I also realized just in terms of being able to play and being aware of what's going on around you, it's actually, so it brings me back to because we did a lot of country gigs and stuff before, and one thing I will say is like, country bass and a lot of the music, there was like definitely some like exceptions. It wasn't like technically virtuosic. It was about like the elements of feel and groove and doing like justice to the song. But what contrary to like a lot of the guitar parts, so, lead guitar parts, that could be at the frontier of guitar playing, basically. Like,
yeah,
a lot of the country
guitar
music.
Intense.
And I found like it was such a good opportunity to say, well, this is like the type of gig where it should be every gig, but definitely it's a great opportunity to say, like, my part, I'm going to know automatically so well that I can be putting 75% of my energy into thinking about how the entire product, how the melody that the singer is singing, how the drummer is playing, and then what I'm doing is not in my head, right? Because it's the worst thing when you got someone and they're just trying to nail their part, but they're becoming oblivious to like what's going on around them, and that's what's so important, and it's what many of us will lose or need some brushing up on after COVID.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
God.
Awareness of what's happening around you. I mean, that's almost level 1, really, in the professional gigging world, right? Like level 1 is, I guess, truly what you're saying is like nail your own part, right? But like really in the pro gigging world, it's like, yeah, but are you listening to what the drums are doing? Are you listening to what the singer's doing? Are you paying attention to the fact that the singer might drop a line and we have to like go to the chorus early? Like, it's like,
yeah,
that's the stuff that you need to be. It's not good enough to just know your own part note for note, right?
Absolutely. And it's like that's why it's like when you learn that stuff, even if your part isn't the vocal melody, try to learn the melody. Maybe even learn some of the lyrics,
Well, and you might be singing backups too.
Right, you might, and then that world, live music, the personnel, it's getting smaller and smaller, at least, what's financially feasible. So more and more, it's like, you got to be able to do backups. You got to be able, a lot of drummers, but other instrumentalists, I know you had Rich De Silva on, and, he was talking about using, I think he was saying he was using Ableton a lot.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like for someone in his position with like his goals in mind, that's like so important. Can you do that? Because it's just that's what the gig calls for, and you go from being someone that you might call on a gig to someone that's like you need on a gig. You need that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's your approach to memorizing music? Because in gigs like that, you got to know a lot of songs, and I mean, even to perform your own compositions that you've written for this recording, I would imagine you have those all memorized. What's your process there?
Yeah. Well, one is review, because even a few weeks without playing it, things will totally get rusty. So it's not like memorize once. It's like constantly go back to it. And so interesting. So like a different approach. Like obviously the stuff that's in here there's some similarities, but for instance, like top 40 gigs, or like more traditional bass playing, my approach is I write down, like 99% of the time, I write down a chart with the form, and I write a chart that's good enough that I could read it or anyone else could read it, and that I could be able to play the song even if it gets called on a gig, like, and I only have like a day's notice in advance and I don't have time. I could be like, well, I did learn it and I have it written down. So I do that. But I am constantly trying to memorize, for most situations, if time permitting. So usually what I'll do is I memorize the form, and I'll put on the track, or after I write it down, I almost like I lie flat on my back and I just like recite the form in chunks, and then I listen, and then I'll do mental practice of going through, and then it's just playing it, and then like at first it's playing it so that you're like you got everything right, and then playing the next level is playing the music in a way where you're almost also aware of your surroundings, even though you're in your little safe space at home,
Mm-hmm.
Stand up, pretend that you are performing, pretend that it's the real deal, pretend that there's no do-overs, and then you see how you do. And so that's almost like, you got to throw yourself into the lion's den before you're actually in the lion's den.
Yeah.
Because that's your place to make the mistakes. So I think that's important. I think everyone's got that story where they had to like cram a whole bunch of music with like almost no time. So I think I one time did like a country gig back in those Toronto days that I miss
Canada
so dearly.
days.
The Canada days. And I remember I got a, like, literally, on Facebook, got a call for the gig like at like 4 a.m. the night before. And, there was about 30 tunes, and I think I had charts that I'd done for about 12 of them or something. And so I just didn't sleep. I just like wrote them all out. And then even like up until like sound check, I was like just getting the final touches done on like a couple of them. And then the gig went well. Like I was, like there were a couple little areas that were like a little weird, but for the most part, like, went well, and I got, calls back for that. Now this is a whole other thing, because the solo stuff,
Your own original, for people who aren't watching, your original music, your transcriptions of your own stuff. Yeah.
right. So that's all original. So my process has kind of changed over the years with some of my arrangements and original solo stuff. At one point, I was doing a lot of things and I wasn't writing anything down. And then over the past about 3 years, I just transitioned to writing everything down. If it's not going to be published, then I write it down, but I don't write like some of the technical things like fingerings, or I'll do it enough that I know what's going on. And what I realize is, for myself, a lot of this stuff, there's so much like mechanical practice involved, that when you're trying, and if you're trying to write something and then you're using like concepts or techniques or ways of doing things that are maybe new for you, but it'll serve the music, you can really get stuck with practicing 8 bars for an entire afternoon or whatever. Like something crazy like that could happen. So what I would do is now I write it I write it all down, and I have my bass usually there, but there'll be a lot of things where like, oh, okay, I can do that. I can't do it yet, but I know what it should be, and then I write it down, and then over like a period of like a week or two, I kind of go through it and I play through it, and then I'll make tweaks and things like that. And I realize that I can just move more quickly when I do that, because I'm in that creative space before I'm in that space where I'm trying to get all the mechanics coming together. Now, if I want to write something that just completely on the instrument, and I want to do it in a quick amount of time, then what I'll do is I'll literally just fall back on like arranging techniques that are like almost ingrained into my muscle memory. Like if it's like a jazz standard, like, and it's just like melody with occasional chords and like a walking bass line, that vocabulary is ingrained in me enough that, give me a few hours and I'll get it like together.
Wow.
At least enough that I can kind of get through it.
Yeah.
So that's like a very different thing than if I'm like, okay, I want to get this percussive thing and I want to get all these other elements
Push
working
the boundaries a little bit.
Right. Whenever I'm
Yeah.
pushing that frontier, then it's like it's not going to come together quickly. If it's just like, I'm going to do an arrangement of this pop tune that's exactly like the other arrangement I did, other than it's a different melody and different chords, that's easy. It's just like piano players, and I play piano. There'll be all kinds of accompaniment techniques that, even some of them originated with like Chopin and stuff, just ways of arpeggiating chords. And you can literally build that in your muscle memory and then throw any melody on top of it. And the learning curve is like, there's a very short learning curve. As soon as it's something that's brand new, like if you didn't know how to play stride piano and then you're like, I want to do stride, then it's a new thing. Stylistically, it's just going to throw you a curveball. Just like, with you guys guitar players, if you haven't Travis picked before, done any of these things, it'd be like, oh man, how do you do that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right, though. Once you do learn some, like a handful of finger picking patterns, for example, you can just put, you can string some chords together, and it's not as hard as the first time you tried to do that with just even one chord, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And think about like those flamenco.
Oh, geez.
And their strumming patterns are like insane.
Yeah.
But it's automatic, and they can do it just so fast because and I think like a lot of students, they don't realize sometimes how much work goes into learning their first song, and they don't realize that when they're learning their 50th song, especially if it's reasonably the same difficulty level, it's gonna be so much faster.
So I think it would be useful for folks who are listening just to hear some of your music to really understand when we're talking about arranging something for solo bass, like what does that even mean? So I want to talk to you about the new record, but can I just play something off of, there was a record called Out of the Basement, pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah, or I could even send you, could I send you a piece from, I'm going to send you a piece right now.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah, let's do that then.
So I'll just give me 2 seconds, and by 2 seconds, I probably mean about like.
This is the Seinfeld bass theme.
So, with going back to memorization, I find it challenging to teach students how to memorize music, and for me, for where I'm at and for what I do, which is a lot of acoustic guitar stuff, a lot of like rhythm, foundational kind of playing, accompaniment of singers, where like the actual like physical playing is not all that challenging. Oftentimes I'm just playing G, C, and D in different orders, but what can get tricky is remembering what chord goes where and how long the sections are and stuff like that. So I've always used, not always, but as I've gotten more experienced and really thought about it and listened to people like Aaron Sterling talk about learning songs, I use expectation to memorize music. So I'm basically like, And we've talked about this on a previous episode, I think. It's like red light, green light. So like, let's say we're learning like Brown Eyed Girl, the song Brown Eyed Girl, right? So the chord progression is G, C, G, D, right? For most of the song. So so that's, green light. It's like we can just play this chord progression indefinitely and it's gonna work, right? And then yellow light is like, okay, something is changing. Something that I don't necessarily expect is coming. And if I can sort of have that, this is like an intuitive sort of feel thing, but it's like, all right, we're going through the verse. It's like there's something's coming. And it's like, oh yeah, it goes to the 4. You, my brown-eyed girl. 4, 5, 1 instead of what was happening before, right? C, D, G. And then, going to the 5 or whatever. So that, and then if we were to go to like, if we were to break key a little bit, if we were to go to F or something for some reason, which doesn't happen in that tune, that would be red light. It's like, holy shit, there's something crazy happening in this section. So it's a little, because the musical, I don't know, like idiom, like that sort of, it like you were saying, Josh, it's like, it's so embedded now that like, yeah, you give me a song with chords and rhythms I recognize, like I can play it for you and learn it very quickly. It's just a question of like, okay, the next section, is there something weird or not? And then if it's not, then I can use my instincts to sort of get through that part. And if there is, then it's like, okay, well, we drop a beat in this section, or because songs tend to do similar things to each other. Right.
It's funny. It's funny. I feel like what you're describing is like a survival mechanism.
At times that is the case. I mean, because there's
gigs,
there is certainly like an element of, there's certain gigs where you just need to learn the whole song and not,
right.
You need to know it note for note. But if we're talking about a bar gig where there's 40 tunes and I don't want to use charts, it's like, that's sort of how I would navigate that.
Interesting.
And I think there's elements of that do spill over into a song where I'm literally playing every single note the same every time.
I wonder if there's some, if bass players have some commonality in the way we might approach things that might be different. And I'm wondering, like, most North American music, the bass is always like, almost always on beat 1 at the, like, it sets the harmony. Right. Versus a melodic player doesn't have that responsibility, and a chordal player can get away with playing like a split second, later.
Or
they can get away with it.
Play a little behind.
Play it. So I'm wondering if it just, like, as like a cultural phenomenon, just the level of like peer pressure and failure. There's like, maybe in for that type of thing, for harmony, there might be like more responsibility, at least on getting the root notes. Like, because you can't. It's harder to get away with that as a bass player, or else you're gonna leave. Because what happens is, like, you might think, oh, it goes to E minor. Oh, then everyone plays a C, and okay, and then that works, right? Because you're playing an E as a bass, then it's just like a first inversion or something.
Sure, yeah.
But you might not know that you played the wrong chord. You might have, so, I wonder. But I also, like, as a learning mechanism, I think that's true. I just don't know if I like would employ it as like a method that I'd write down. It's more like, I think that's just like a way of describing a phenomenon that kind of just happens, like this red light, green light, yellow light. I think that's true. Like, of course, if I'm learning a piece, it's going to like stick out to me when there's like this abrupt key change or something that's little new or less usual. And then that would be like a red light, and then green light would be like, oh, this is just this, blah, 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 But I certainly wouldn't be like, oh, here's my red light section. I don't, but that's interesting if it is for you. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and it's I don't want to sound like I'm just flying out the seat of my pants on gigs, because like I don't do that. Like I think it's just the way I organize the information in my brain like maybe another way of describing it would be like, in a small way, let's say the first 16 bars of your song are like C and F, 1 4, the whole way,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so if you were writing that out, you would write, you would write 1 bar of that, and then you would put a repeat sign and you would say times 16 or repeat 15 times or whatever, right? And then you would just sort of, you're not thinking about every bar. So for me, it's like, the verse is 1 4, chorus goes to 5, and that's the whole song. And then if I can remember that,
okay. I agree with you.
then the only thing that my mind needs to focus on is like, all right, in the bridge, shit's getting weird. We're changing keys, and we're playing.
Always gets weird, in the bridge.
And like I have to remember that. The rest of the song I can shorthand in my head, and I just feel like when I'm teaching students, a lot of them are in that mode of they're reading, an ultimate guitar like chords and lyrics, and it's like, you know what I mean? I know, but that's how they learn though, and that's how they, and I want to impress upon them. It's like. But I find it difficult to communicate that, the verse is just C and F. Like, you don't have to read this lyric sheet and play C every time it says C and play F. Just feel how the groove is, and here's where the chords are. And I find that difficult to communicate.
I wonder if like that idea of like just the chords and lyrics just comes out of this concept of just really not wanting to throw like. This idea of like, hey, you learn some simple chords on guitar and then you could play all your favorite songs and you already know how to read words and you know how to sing these songs.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from that kind of like standpoint where it's like, for some people, at that point, it's just going to be pretty bewildering to them to like see music when they're not used to seeing it.
The conception of a bar would be a weird thing for them.
Right. But have you ever had that experience and how silly it is, or if you've ever showed up to like a rehearsal or this hasn't happened to me for years, but like, some gig or some situation, and then you get handed like a lyric sheet with chords, and it's just like, unless you know the tune,
it's
going to be.
It's fucking useless.
Oh man, I mean, I've gotten all shapes and sizes of charts from, but you know what, man? It's like that's the gig then. Like if that's how the artist is gonna convey their music to me, then now it's my job to, like the first time I play that song with them, make it feel like I know it already. So then
my mind when I see that, if that like happens, is usually just like, okay, I got homework to do.
Yeah, or I mean, if we're just
doing my
best
best to the gig,
Yeah,
oh my gosh,
with just those. One thing that I was
that'd be crazy to get
light,
that on the gig. Yeah,
green light, yellow light thing. I found that pretty useful since you mentioned that, because I find that I spend a little bit too much time on the green light stuff. It's like I need to remind myself, like, hey, Mike, it's just these 2 fucking chords. You know what I mean? Like,
they're fucking chords, aren't they?
They're just fucking chords. But like I think it's handy, but it's true in a sense. I do get that impression from bass players. You can't feel it. Whereas I've played gigs where literally they're like, we don't give you a set list, and that'll work for a guitarist, because it's like, oh yeah, you just follow along by ear.
Or like they just want you playing lead lines, right?
No,
like
chords.
Improvised.
Literally, it was acoustic guitar, bass, drums, and me.
No set list.
And I was like, hounding the dude, but it was more like a Nashville sort of thing. Like, and it was like, oh, we're just gonna play some fucking songs and they'll love it. And it's like, all right. I didn't get it at the time though. I was like pissed off. I was like, I gotta get a fucking set list or I'm out, man. Like,
right.
I mean, you know what? It's like one of those things. It's like, you know what? I think like you prepare for if you have the time to prepare, which is going to be 99% of the situations, then you prepare. You have no excuse.
Yeah.
And then just when there's those situations that are out of your control, where you have to do things on the fly because it's a jam, or if it's some situation like that that's out of your control, approach it with confidence, and all the preparation and the times that you've been, thrown a loop and thrown into this kind of jam kind of situation, that stuff's just gonna have to come out, and you just gotta like full force go through it. And probably the only thing I would say, like, if you want to be like good at that, then go to jams, because that the culture is not to know the stuff. It's, you know, usually it's like the culture is, can you just kind of know the standard repertoire, and can you kind of make your way through it and be just really in tune with what's going around you. But I've always been very against using real gigs. I shouldn't say real gigs, but as the opportunity to test your ability to do things on the fly. And we've all been in those situations.
We've known a few players that do that a lot.
I'm definitely not advocating for that, just to be clear.
And
it is a fun type of gig. I like, because I've played the gig since, and like all the gigs are like that, and it's a different shtick. It's not out of lack of caring. It's literally this person knows like 500 songs, and they're like, I don't really want to choose a song, so I'm just gonna choose it in the moment of. And it is fun at the end of the night, because you just let go, and you're just like, okay, you know.
Yeah, you're just like a regular jam gig could be that same thing, where it's like, it's about something different. It's about how do you connect on the fly without using a bunch of charts, without using a bunch of, you know, hand symbols. Can you just open your ears and react? And it changes the music, and there is something. I mean, and jazz has got an element of that, you know, in terms of the improvisation, even though it's a set platform most of the time, other than like free jazz and other things like that. But the idea is you're sort of seeing these musicians in their sort of vulnerable state. There's like a vulnerability to it. It's like they don't know what they're gonna say. They don't know what the conversation's gonna be about. There's no plan. You know, and it's awesome. I think many of us probably, you know, would love to be having more opportunities to do that with, you know, obviously the right musicians, because, you know, it becomes apparent quickly when someone's not listening very well.
One of the most fun times I had recently was like, I was playing a gig with Genevieve Fisher, and we went to the bar after and like jumped up on stage and did a blues jam. And like, I didn't know any of the songs, and our lead guitarist, a great blues player, and he was like, yeah, it's these chords, and here we go. And it's just like, okay, sweet. And like, let's not forget that there's an entire art form called free jazz that is literally just this. And that's like a highly regarded art form, right? So, and there's a lot to that. It's like, what can you sort of feel in the moment, and how do you play off of each other, and what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to make something that sounds totally whack, or are we trying to make something that actually is cohesive in the moment? And so, I think there's a lot of value to being thrown into that quote unquote fire, and feeling that pressure of like, okay, I got to remember that this is CFG, and then it's A minor, and then it's this. And it's like, for some people that could be really stressful, but I think it's a good, if you're not in a high pressure situation, I think it's a good place to hone certain skills that will help you out. Even just learning songs quickly. I wouldn't want to do that in front of like 20,000 people. God no. And no way are we advocating
if that's
for that.
What you do, like from the doing, I guess, you know, just makes you more accustomed to that environment. Have you heard Lenny Tristano's Intuition? I think that was like one of the like pinnacle like first free jazz records. Yeah, check it out. I mean, it was like I think that was like right when that kind of concept was like just kind of kicking off.
Flooding.
And once again, it's like you totally hear it. That's just like, you know, you have the vocabulary you have, and you have the ears that you have, and where you've developed that, and then it's just like, you know, where are you gonna go? And it's really good.
So let me,
kind of like our conversation now.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
Let me play something for the folks out there. This is a new track off of Josh's upcoming, or is it going to be out by the time this podcast goes? Maybe it will be.
But are you going to post it before?
Or no, August 24th.
August 21st?
No.
21st.
So actually it'll be 21st. Sorry, geez. So it'll be still upcoming. It'll be still upcoming. This is a track called Frostbite, and we're going to play it for you right now.
Shit.
Dude.
It sounded
filter?
very. It sounded very. I don't know if like to you guys. I guys just going through the streaming program. It was like very, very compressed and like.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
it
there was
would
like
be.
a noise gate on it for sure on my end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully it came across okay on YouTube. On the audio side of things, we'll just use the actual file. But, dude,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
hell of a song. So that's your first peek at some of the new music from Josh Cohen's new album, Freedom. That track is called Frostbite. So just to be clear, for the folks that are listening to that was one single performance, right?
There's actually like three sections that I did. I did like the first. Sorry, I did the first section up until the solo, and then I recorded the solo, and I recorded each of them many, many times.
Well, then it
Sure,
doesn't count.
but it's not okay. But,
and then I recorded the last part because I couldn't just like I wanted to make sure the effect I was using on the
The filter,
solo
yeah.
part,
Mhm.
was like
The
done
filter is super cool. That's
done
cool that you're
properly and
branching out
cleanly.
into that stuff
Yeah,
because
that
it's
was a
like
great effect.
it's one of
Yeah,
those
it's just
things
like
where it's
an envelope filter.
yeah, it's just like it's like it's a compositional thing. It's not like a ooh, this is gonna mask shit. It's like this is gonna enhance shit, you know?
Right. Yeah. So basically, I've been like staying away from like loop pedals or anything like that, but just
Yes.
things that tweak the sound. I have like a reverb pedal, and then I got the
Reverb will be
MXR.
cool, yeah.
Mm. The
The
tone's
MXR
great,
and
man.
the Basist.
But
Yeah.
again, just to be clear though, like you're playing all those parts at the same time.
That's
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I'm trying
Every
to
part
say.
at the same time.
You didn't
And
go
there's
One
in.
bass man.
there is a live performance of me playing it at the NAMM show.
Nice.
Oh,
I
we should
did-
We should
connect
link to
in
that,
the show
yeah.
notes.
Yeah, it's yeah, so it was the NAMM 2020. I don't think there'll be a NAMM 2021.
Yeah.
Probably not. No.
But yeah, it was the NAMM 2020 solo bass competition sponsored by PJB, Phil Jones Bass.
Is that the one that you won and got that fancy
I
thing in the
won,
background?
yeah.
Oh, nice!
Yeah,
Congratulations.
I won. Yeah, that's
Winner!
The prize is that NS stick.
Oh, right on.
NS Omni bass, sorry.
Omnibass.
Not yeah, NS Omni
Fuck, man. Oh, so I have one question. So it's one of those things where you're saying, oh, the more I do these, the more I get to the point where it's like certain elements are like, oh yeah, like that's just that thing I do. You know, like I can do that arrangement technique now pretty confidently. What are the things holding you back from getting to the point where it's like, oh yeah, you want me to like play drums and bass and the melody to this song? You know, there you go. Is there certain like issues
Time.
with the bass? Time, but like you know, like so say for instance, on
I know what you're
guitar,
saying.
like say for instance, one of the things that they tweaked was instead of doing guitar in perfect fourths all across, they're like, oh, we'll just have a fucking major third, yeah, major third in there. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So is there technical stuff about the bass where it's like, you know, I sometimes I have to shift the strings that I'm on because I can't do chords and melody on that string, or
Absolutely. I think every single piece on the album has some elements of like, ooh, really using the bass as a bass, like to do a bass thing, even within that
Yeah.
context of solo bass. Every song has that, but also every song has that element of compromise. Some more jarring than others. And I also like experienced that when I was arranging all this music by Bach for like this Bach festival.
never heard of them.
Yeah.
Bach, there's a Bach festival?
Yeah,
Shit.
I played at the Wapaka Bach
That'd be
festival.
terrifying. They'd all be so like judgmental.
No,
know what I mean?
like I played it was Bach in the brewery, so I did an hour-long set of
Okay. Yeah.
solo bass, and I did. So there's like, I mean, I could go through them like and yeah, so like, well, just the one you heard, so Frostbite. So like during the solo section, with the filter, I wanted melody, bass line, and percussion, sort of a percussion. So the percussion that you're hearing is just a left-hand slap. It's like a common slap bass technique,
Sure.
but I
yeah.
just put it on 2 and 4. So nothing crazy in that sense. But what happens is, like, you know, you can't adjust any of those levels. It is what it is, and you can't change the effect. So if I put reverb, it's reverb on everything. It's not reverb
see.
on just the highs.
Yes.
Now, Charlie Hunter, and I'm sure as a guitar player you've heard of Charlie Hunter,
I
right?
have heard of him.
So he has like split pickups. So he'll have like two outputs.
Oh, yeah.
Now he's doing a 6-string. For a while he was doing a 7-string guitar. The last I saw him, he was playing with Lucy Woodward, and he was playing in town here. And then he was doing everything on this 6-string guitar that he like put, like he tuned it and had like bass strings at the bottom and stuff. So it was like he really pared things down. But yeah, he'll have like a little, you know, reverb or a certain tone and going through a tube amp on the upper strings, and then the bass is going through a bass amp solid state.
Wow.
So it's like I'm like totally like I've been thinking and dreaming for about like an 8-string bass, and so it's just always the thing is like part of what I like that I've been doing is I'm doing something unexpected on the instrument. As soon as you go to the 8 string and then you have the split pickups, then expectations change, and then the
Yes.
puzzle is different because it's more like it's like, well, everything's in this position that I need or whatever. Or
Yeah, the bass strings are going to be bass. The high
Right.
strings are going to be melody.
Exactly. So like
Yeah.
I would say, remember we were talking about like devices also that you can like use over and over again. So like this idea, like one of the pieces is like a blues called Far From Home Blues, and that one was like very much like, here is a written walking bass line in an F jazz blues, and I'm playing it on the bottom 3 strings. That always gets confusing. When I say bottom, I mean the lowest, and some people they think it's
Yes.
The lowest
the
sounding.
Good direction.
right.
Yeah.
I think most musicians say it that way, but it always confuses our students
Mm-hmm.
because they're thinking
word.
geographic.
Right from
not-
the start, you just can't get anything across to your students. You know, right from the start, it's like, yeah, I know none of this makes sense. I know.
Abs
Yeah,
fucking
right.
backwards.
Yeah.
So so like that piece, like, yeah, the entire bass line I'm always playing on those strings, but the melodies and like the soloing, I play on some of those same strings sometimes.
Mm.
So when I play them, they have to be either in between beats, or it has to be when my fingers are on one of those, not that particular of those 3 strings. So that happens with the 6-string bass, and I think if I expanded to like 8 string and just said, here's my bass, here's my melody and chords, then there wouldn't be that dance in between that has to happen.
And you kind of enjoy that. The dance.
I kind of do, but like, we live a long life, so you can.
So
hopefully I made it past 27. So
if you had an 8-string bass, then do you mean that like a couple of the strings would be like the same notes? They'd be redundant, but you would now be able to play without overlapping your hands?
The typical thing to do with an 8-string bass, like in my scenario, probably would just be to add 2 high strings. I don't need to go any lower than that low B. Like that's pretty damn low.
Yeah. Yeah.
I recently did like some recording sessions, and I was asked to redo like the parts where I use the low B, because they thought it sounded like not so defined.
Okay.
And it's true,
too
like
deep.
Yeah, like bass players, we kind of like we keep hearing it, we get more used to it, and it's just like a choice of a sound. But I think for some musicians that aren't dealing with those frequencies as often, they might actually like confuse it for like, it might sound like not like a particular note sometimes.
That makes sense.
And there's some people that advocate for like extend longer scale, right? So I have a 34, which is like standard for a bass. I'm not sure what guitars are, like 28 or something. I don't know.
There's a few different ones. I don't know what they are though.
But standard is 34, but some people will get 36-inch basses, and some people will get these extensions. I think you've probably seen them on uprights and stuff, where it's like you have the nut ends here, but then one string is like set up in a way. I don't even know how they do it though, because I don't know.
Are you talking about kind of almost like what a banjo has?
Yeah,
the
something
banjo
like
has
that.
like that little, like it's like one of the strings is shorter, and
Right.
the neck is almost shorter
Yes,
there.
I do know what you mean.
I never understood that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this would be like there's some sort of equivalent that's been employed, but the idea is like if you have a thick gauge B string and you have a longer scale, the note is going to be more defined because it's
That makes
if
sense.
you play like a synth B, like a very pure tone at that same register, it might sound more defined than on an electric bass.
Sure,
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, some people do that. So I think the more you get into recording, which is I don't know if you guys have kind of had that happen with you with this whole pandemic situation. I've just been recording a lot more for different people, for hire or for barter or
Yeah.
like several things going on, and I just do the recordings here. But yeah, the more I do it, like, I mean, I do have a few basses here. I recently, this Fender Elite series, I tried playing it, but I thought the tone was like too imposing. It was like very it stood out, which was great for like slap and stuff. But it almost like imposed itself too much. And then the Ken Smith, with my standard bass, I was just like, this one blends in with the track better. It's
Yeah.
not as imposing. It's weird. It's like it's very clearly and defined, but it's warm and it's not imposing. Versus like the Fender that I have is like very like much in your face. But I do see the value that like once if you're doing this that as like your main source of income, like especially, you know, there's an increasingly like more reason to have multiple instruments for that particular tone, for that old string tone, for that flat, you know, flat wound strings. And like I think generally speaking, you know, a lot of guitar players will have, you know, more guitars on hand. Like it's more typical to see guitar players do like guitar switches.
Yeah.
Once you're like a recording professional and like that's your main gig, then you know you're gonna have dozens. You might, you know.
I'm good with 3, but yeah, man. I mean,
I'm good with less is more, but all the luthiers want us to say pick up the guitar.
Sure.
Exactly, yeah.
But no, I mean, but you're totally right. Like with bass, depending on the genre, right? Like if we're talking about, you know, something like even rock versus country can be very, very different. Like, or even from one country recording to the next can be very different. Like if you listen to the bass on like an Eric Church record versus, you know, the bass on maybe like a Florida Georgia Line record or something a little bit more like, you know, polished, for lack of a better term. It's like on an Eric Church record, the bass got all kinds of growl. It's very raw sounding. And on some of the more pop side stuff, it's fat, it sits low, and it occupies exactly the frequencies they want it to and nothing else. It's not spilling over. It's not interfering with the guitars. Everything's nice and clean. And that way they can absolutely push every sound as hard as it can go in terms of compression and presence and stuff like that. And nothing is going to be interfering. Whereas with a more like old school traditional kind of rock thing, it's like you kind of want a little bit of that greasiness where it's like, yeah, the bass is kind of pushing up into the guitar's register and vice versa or what have you. So there can be such a difference. And then if you're doing something like you did, Josh, like you need that full range, your bass needs to have that natural full range because it's the only instrument going on, right?
Yeah, like actually it's crazy. So there are like products that'll sort of work for like more standard like functional kind of bass that just don't work for me. Like there's something called like amp plug. I don't know. I don't know if we lost Mike, if he's gonna come back.
Oh yeah, he looks like he might be frozen. Oh, he's still there.
I just lost your video, but if you guys still had it.
Your visual is frozen, Mike, yeah.
Oh
no.
Yeah, so yeah, no, there's this product called Amp. You're good now, Mike. There's this product called Amp Plug, and it's very convenient. It just like fits into your. You've probably seen them. It fits into your input jack. It's great for like when you just practice on the road or whatever. But the problem is, like at the low frequencies of the bass, it's okay when you're playing monophonic, but when you're playing, 4, 5, 6 strings at once, all of a sudden, like it's just it can't handle it. It's just like, it's like I don't know if you call it distortion or it's like a lack of tone or whatever.
Yeah, it just kind of gets muddy or lack of clarity.
Exactly. So I have to go into something that can handle more. And even with amps, that's sometimes true. Like the Phil Jones bass amps that I use, like they capture that full range. But I've also played on some amps where it was like when I started actually playing like the multiple parts, it's just a lot of sound. Like the strings are being played a lot. It's louder.
I would assume that like as soon as you introduce any element of harmonic distortion when you're playing intervals that are close together at such a low range, like you're just going to lose all the clarity. It's just going to turn into mush. So you would really need something with like a lot of headroom that could really take a lot of sound without breaking up at all. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And like, I mean, it's very rare, you'll get like, thirds, in the low register.
Yes. Yes.
I think I've
That's
done
why
like,
the G chord I always remove that low third in it.
Yeah, the B.
I never play
Never
that.
play
Yeah.
it. That's not true. I play it sometimes.
Does
but
anybody play that?
I'll play the third
finger
if it's like if I'm like for effect, like if I'm hammering onto it from the A or something, just to really like
Sure.
to highlight it as a note in that chord. But if I'm playing a G chord and I'm just strumming away, the index finger is never engaged on that
wait
that
a
B.
second.
Never.
So I'm sure you guys watch Rick Beato.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like become like a god, in terms
Yeah.
of, like,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
He's very popular.
Yeah, so he was, advocating for, that G position where you're, playing the third fret, so the D on the B string with your third finger.
Yep.
Because then you can go to a C add 9, and then you can go to D, and it's all in that same position. I
Yes.
think you guys probably play that all the time.
Always.
So if you're playing that and you remove the B, then you actually have no third at all.
That's exactly it.
That's right. Yeah, you're just playing a bunch of fifths. Yep. Sounds great.
Really?
Sounds great.
Fucking
And will
roll,
you teach it to the kids that way, or no? That just comes out.
I
that's the
do.
Mormon
I have
thing.
I
I have
do.
a trick that I teach kids. I can teach them G, C, D, and E minor. It's not real C and it's not real E minor, with just 2 fingers each. But yeah, like when I teach them full chord, I teach them like the full chord. But
I mean,
I
I
never
want them
seen
to.
you mention-
I want them to know both ways, but like, why would I not show them what I do all the time?
In
Like,
case it just like adds to confusion, and it's just
Yeah, like,
you will
I
know
mean,
that by
yeah.
the 10th lesson.
It's useful to know all the different ways to do, because with a G chord, you can voice it. Like if you need the B, then take your ring finger off the D, off of the B string, off that D note, right? Open up that B string.
Yeah.
Now you got the B, and it's on top, so it's going to be a little bit more.
and it changes what
right.
fingers you can kind of use. with it,
but,
right?
I
Do
mean,
you ever finger the G differently, Al?
Yep. Depends on what.
Yeah.
Depends on what you're trying to do. Like
G to C.
there's pretty much only 2 ways of doing it. It's either you got your middle finger on the lowest note, or you got your ring finger on the lowest
Yeah.
note, depending on if I'm
Does
trying to.
Does that major third in that register like disturb you when you're playing solo, or is it more in the band? Or
Yeah,
recording
a
time?
little bit of both. It just kind
Muddy.
of sounds muddy, and
Yeah.
it also depends on how hard you're strumming too, right? Because if you're going in
True.
super light, then you can get away with it. But if you're playing a little bit more percussively, a little bit more rhythmically, I just don't think it sounds good. So I'll leave it
And then-
out.
What happens when you go if you do like capo 3, so it's not G anymore?
It can
it's
get a
like
little
B
bit,
flat.
yeah, it gets a little bit better. I probably leave it out a lot of the time just habitually, but
Right.
Yeah.
but you can
That's a good call.
definitely rock it.
I'll tell you what, they don't teach that in the Hal Leonard Method 1 book.
They don't, man.
Not.
and that,
They
I
don't
mean
teach
that's
chords in that.
that's one of the shortfalls of, and I mean I use books all the time. I think they're fantastic tools, but that is one of the shortcomings of books like that, is it's rigid. It's like the book can't change. Can change printing to printing if the publisher's okay with it, but
Yeah.
like it can't. It's not malleable to the student's experience and what they're trying to do.
That's
and,
why they need a teacher.
Yeah, man.
Teachers are
So-
so important, man.
I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
get
They need
into.
Al Rowe.
I want to get into the making of this record, Josh. Can you talk about the writing process, like how you what couple of stories about some of the songs and how you wrote them?
Right, yeah. So, quite often with like an album, there's like some sort of musical idea or theme that ties everything all together, like in terms of the messaging itself.
Yes.
This was an example where what ties everything together was a goal, and that was this idea of musical freedom on an atypical instrument for polyphonic performance. And so like I've been really obviously like enamored with like the abilities of like there's been some guitar players like Stanley Jordan, and then there's been obviously a whole slew of pianists like Oscar Peterson and Herbie Hancock, and this thing that they can access where they're like creating these polyphonic textures, similar to what much of like Baroque music would be, but obviously in a modern sense of these multiple lines, and they access this point of like freedom with it. And I don't even think it's not even for a full performance. They only get there, for these moments where they're just truly like freely creating, but
Sure.
at this polyphonic level, which I think is like it's just different. It is like in many ways it's harder to like, it is hard to get there. And I just had this goal of like, I want to be able to pick up the bass, and I want to be at this point. I think like there was like, all right, let me go back a little bit. I think a lot of bass players have had this happen where they're at like a family event or something, and it's like, hey, Josh, you're a musician. Can you like play us something? And you're literally on your own, right? And you got the bass, and then you're like, well, I know this bass line. Oh, I know this bass line.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, something's missing. So you can sing. Some people sing, and they employ that, and I've done a little bit of that. And I wanted to say, well, I'm an entertainer. Like, I want to be able to entertain on my instrument, like on my own, like whether or not I'm playing with people and connecting, or whether I'm trying to produce. And I think with it, like there's like this, it's like a natural tendency to like want control. It's like most human, it's like a sense of power. I think like most humans desire power and control to some degree.
That's what you should have called the album.
Power, right?
Power and control.
I think we all, so we all have that. We also have that desire to connect with people and these other things, and they kind of oppose, they kind of go hand in hand. And I've really wanted to master the instrument. And what I've learned is you can't master the instrument. You can get closer to, but you will never master the instrument, and you will never have freedom. You'll never actually get it. There will never be a point, even the Jacob Colliers of the world, there's never a point where anything that you can think of or transmit from here is just going to come out. There's always going to be those pitfalls. But what I realize is it's not about that. And I think this cuts deeper into like what we're trying to achieve as musicians, especially, is that it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. If everything that you're doing is just because you want to arrive somewhere, one, you will never arrive. The goalposts will always change. Even when you're successful and happy, you'll always want more. So what you got to say is, I want to enjoy the scenery while I'm on that ride. I want to enjoy the adventure. It's not just about getting to the top of the mountain. It's about the climb up the mountain. And so what I discovered is like I was trying to achieve this thing, and I wrote a lot of the music, most of the music, no, all of it actually, like the end of 2017. And I kept being like, I want to record it all live in front of an audience, and I want all my solos while I'm like self-accompanying, basically. I want it all to be like off the cuff, like completely original, on the spot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't matter how much. What happened though is I had moments of it. And like, I think in the process, I think what I said with most of the repertoire, what I can safely do now is I can absolutely like improvise
and embellish.
But it never sounded like what I wanted to be on that. It wasn't good enough. It was like I was accessing that point, and I realized this album captures like a snapshot in that process. And maybe the next album or the one after that, maybe things will be at that level. So basically every solo is like composed. It's not I think there's like one or something where I kind of just did it on the fly, but pretty much it was all like pre-thought. But everything that's there in my practice room, I can improvise. When I play live, I will improvise a bit. But what happened was when I was just laying down the album, I was like, no, like I want this to be really good. I don't I don't want
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Also, too, couldn't you do if you were to do that as your method instead of doing it on one night? Because I know like a lot of people, like John Mayer, has that awesome Where the Light Is, performance DVD, and I think that's over like 2 or 3 nights. I know it's over 2 nights at least. So it's like you take the
Yeah.
best take from like 20
Yeah.
performances and be like, there we go.
Totally, man. Like you're always growing, and that's like I'm gonna put that into my little case of things to do because that's a good option.
You could also
Josh
do
Cohen live album.
Yeah, you could do a companion record, right? Of like, songs from this new album, maybe a couple of your favorites from the old one, and maybe like, some arrangements of some covers or whatever, and like, yeah, book 3 nights at a venue somewhere and just throw a mic up and do it, right?
Do
Like,
video, yeah, totally, man. Like when venues are happening.
sure, of course, yeah.
I think they're gonna be happening maybe sooner in Canada. We'll see.
Ooh,
Um,
I don't
Yeah,
know.
America's having a bit of a rough time.
Things are looking that well here. But we are coming up there for a good chunk of time. Gonna be quarantining
When?
at the cottage. I'm doing a loop this Friday, but I'm literally not crossing Canada. I'm just updating my visa. But then
Nice.
the next week we're gonna come up, me, Ale, and the dog, Lima.
Oh yes, I forgot you got a pup.
Nice.
Yeah. She's
Pups
a
are the
teenager
way.
now.
Yeah, I mean, I call my dog a
Puppy
pup
for
and she's
life.
Fucking
Yeah,
5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to be responsible for her whole life. So, and
Yeah.
that said, she never grows up.
Yeah, that's right.
That's your daughter.
Yeah. So, looking forward to that. But I'm also just like, I think we've all like sort of stepped back. Like my original plan, after recording this, was like touring. Like I'm supposed to tour in California, and haven't made a final decision on that. But yeah, that was the original idea. But now with everything sort of changing, and I don't know if you guys started picking up more students like I have. Like I've just been like taking on a whole pile more students, and then I've just been sort of thinking like I think I'm gonna write a book. I think I'm gonna just do more recording.
Mm-hmm.
Because that idea of like touring your album is probably effectively not a reasonable goal, I'd say, for the next year.
Sure.
Certainly not.
Um,
Yeah.
It's
swimming
liberating in a
upstream.
way. There's a silver lining, like with all this stuff, and it's so hard to talk about silver linings because there's literally people that are
dying,
just really struggling with the whole thing. And I know obviously lots of musicians are, but I think it's also like you got to find this if it exists for you, help other people out when you can, but also like, use that silver lining for whatever it is. And I think for a bunch of us, we're kind of maybe thinking about how we value things differently. And one thing I will say, like when you're on your deathbed, like think about what are you going to want to know? Like you're probably going to want to know that you've been a good parent, a good brother, a good, all your familial connections. In terms of your career, you're going to want to know like what's sticking around past that point. And I think I love performing live, and those moments you capture for yourself, and sometimes they're on video. But I think something about recording is that moment is captured. It's like a body of work.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always give you that immediate financial success or financial return. But you might, this might force us to think about those kinds of things differently. And teaching students, like they go out and have their own careers and they learn what you've taught them. And so, you have to find out what works for you. But I think we're all like just questioning what is important to us. Like, 'cause we now actually have a break. We're not just thinking, well, what's important is this gig I got this weekend.
Yeah, paying the bills.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Right? It's like, what have you guys been like having these thoughts?
Well, I think this podcast has been one thing that we've put more and more
Love it.
time into, and
Love it. So entertaining. I love
I've started trying to create more content online. And
Your
just sort
Twitch
of
stream's going well.
yeah, I've been doing
100
okay on
subscribers.
Twitch, and just I've taken it as a bit of an opportunity to foray into becoming a bit more of a content creator. Dave Kirby put it.
You have that voice and personality.
Yeah,
I know.
it's got the
Oh,
looks
thanks, man.
too.
Yeah, man. You could like the way you describe and talk about things is definitely it's pretty appealing. I could see you being pretty successful in that
Oh, thanks, man.
for sure. Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, it's one of those things
And
where
now you got you and Mike working together on it. It's good.
yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the two of us working together, this podcast would not get off the ground at all, right? It's nice to you
Yeah.
need those partnerships.
I love it how like Mike on all the podcasts I've checked. Like I just love how like Mike always like there's something wrong with this computer or something.
Oh my god! Literally, fucking today, like I go to set up this fucking mic, and it's making like squealy noises. So I go to set up this mic that I'm currently using, and the fucking the shock mount is not working correctly. But I figured it out.
Dude,
Okay.
technical
Unless-
difficulties, like half the job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just getting close.
Took us like almost an hour to get off the ground today.
Oh yeah, it's weird when you meet
It's
people
always
who
it's
don't
always something.
have careers like this, and when something little goes wrong, like, oh, that thing's not working, oh, it's like, oh dude, if that's pissing you off, just like try to figure out how to work Discord or fucking
Yeah.
Google Meets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Have you ever had like this feeling like so it's like when you don't know it, like if you think about some of the hobbies you have outside of music and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, like I'm pretty good at that. Like I know that pretty well. But then you're like the discipline that you know the most, like we obviously have all of us know the most in music. I've never felt more ignorant in my life than I do now about music because like as you learn more, what you actually learn is what you don't know.
Ooh, Kevin Dietz talked about this. I think it's called the
Dunning-Kruger effect.
effect.
Yeah.
The Dunning-Kruger effect. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And at that point, that's when you have to like say it's like once again, it's like you gotta enjoy learning for learning's sake, and you gotta enjoy the doing for doing's sake, and it's not about you being this like iconic like figure that everyone goes to for knowledge.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know you're
that
what you know.
probably won't happen. Maybe like 300 or 400 years ago when it's like, yeah, there's only like 10 people in the world that are good at piano. But it's like,
I think nowadays it's like, can you bring value to a client if you're working a contract thing? If you're a member of their band, can you bring value? Like you were talking about earlier, Josh. It's like, yeah, Rich is really good at Ableton, running tracks and stuff like that, and that makes him somebody you need on your gig. He's bringing
Right.
that extra value. He's going over and above just being a great drummer. Yourself, you can sing backup vocals. You're bringing that value. And I mean, in a general sense, do you show up on time? Do you learn the tunes? Are you act professional? Can you bring value to somebody else? Or if you're trying to create content, can you bring value to a group of people, to an audience? It's like, hopefully on this podcast, we're giving some cool insight on how to sort of navigate this industry and maybe inspiring people in ways to develop their own careers and find their own sort of path and stuff like that. Or maybe it's entertaining and people just want to listen to it while they're going for a walk or whatever. But it's like, can you bring value to someone else? That's how you can build a sustainable career in this industry. And if you're always sort of got a mind for what do other people need, what do other people want, I think you'll do just fine, you know?
Absolutely.
it's a
Absolutely.
good little blurb right there.
Yeah.
I think we're
I'm
going
gonna
to keep that.
agreement with that.
I disagree.
Do you want to? I'm curious about the recording process, obviously, because I'm a huge recording nerd. Like, did you work with a producer? Did you do this all yourself? What was the?
Yeah. So no producer. I did all the tracking and everything myself, just
Sweet.
in my basement here with very, very minimal gear, no mics or anything. That's all
Logic,
direct.
Pro Tools.
all Logic 7.
Nice. Wow. Okay.
That old?
Dude, when you're running one track, it's like
I don't know anything about Logic. Is Logic 7 old?
use Sibelius notation software for like writing down things. And then you could call it mixing, but it's more like EQing and mastering, and adding some of the reverbs and things like that. Sergio Aguilar, he's like a session bassist and performing bassist and producer and audio engineer out of Merida in the Yucatan.
Hey,
So
that's
I
where you
know
got
him
married,
through
isn't it?
through my wife. So
There you go.
and he's just a wonderful guy, and so we made that work. And then of course the art was Josh Jones, and my brother Dan did the graphic design of just putting things together
In a professional
And-
manner.
Yeah, and then I did a GoFundMe. It's like GoFundMe .com/f/solo-bass-album. And so I'm still getting some donations to that. It's like basically people have pre-ordered, and so that's helped.
Great.
Yeah, and that's been great because it's helped fund some things. And then the book self-published. It'll be it'll be available on Amazon through like KDP Publishing, Kindle Publishing.
Nice.
And that's it. I mean, the thing is, like, the work is the pre-production. It's so funny. It's so funny now, like recording bass lines for different artists. I'm been recording on Rain Stern's new first album. So you'll love her. I'll send you some tracks once it's done. I like you just kept coming to mind, Al, because I was like, man, if she lived in Toronto, I would have sent her your way to like for production and recording and stuff.
Oh, damn. Well, appreciate that.
Yeah, she's phenomenally talented. So and hardworking, and I think she's the sort of like just budding and like just like a really amazing songwriter. Like her sense of melody and lyricism and stuff like that, and she's a great guitar player. And so I'm recording on her album. It's going to be called Into the Light, and I just finished all the tracking. We did the first half of the album was recorded. I did a session at a studio on like 30. I don't know if it is a big deal, but 32-bit.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
if
that'd
you
be
can
pretty high resolution, right?
Yeah, but I don't
96K?
think I've read things that's like only if you're really processing the sound a whole bunch
Yeah.
would you ever notice the noise difference.
Yeah.
But then basically this pandemic, I just recorded the second half here, and then that was only in the last few days. And a lot of thought and intention put into every recording, but I mean, it was all about being there in the moment, using the vocabulary I have, and just serving the song. And like there were moments where I recorded something, I'm like, I don't need to put that lick in there, or let's do another take, or and so we just had a few back and forths, and like a very different process. Whereas in like Freedom, that was like pre-production, and the pre-production is me in a room practicing. And that was it. And I think like I've gravitated towards that because I didn't, for me at least, this always changes, but I didn't want to spend so much of my career like just in front of a laptop. And I think I certainly have lots of colleagues and friends that have gone that route, and I think that there's something good about that route. It's just that I just knew it was going to like mean my fingers were not going to be on the bass very often. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, what brings me more joy? And I thought, you know what? It's holding that instrument like in my hands. And I was like, what can I do that literally forces me to maximize my time as much as I can on the instrument? And sort of that's what's happened. But also doing session work feels that way too, in terms of just, and I think I want to get more and more into that. Like I've really enjoyed it, just serving the song and just getting tracks from people.
It's
And it
different
also,
mindset.
yeah, it's like it's composing. It's composing my part that's going to fit the best, and that feels like the side of the glass that I'm also really happy with, because it also involves a lot of playing. It's not a bunch of audio processing and manipulating waves and things like that for the entire day. Right? Oh, and it's so like the idea with that is like, you do your track, maybe you check it out, you shift a couple things here and there, maybe if you think it needs it, but if you really think it needs it, you just do another take, and then you send it along its way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really like all like the main work is like on the instrument still, and it's just capturing it. And I don't even use headphones. Because I'm going all direct in, I'm not miking, which is just very simple. And the bass, I've done stuff with miking the Ken Smith and miking amps and stuff at Humber College Studio. They did all kinds of mics, fancy mics. And the best tone I ever got, I thought, was just the direct line, and then sometimes adding like those amazing inboard like plugins. Like they're like top notch, these digital plugins now.
It always, the direct tone is always the best.
Yeah. Right, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so like, so when I'm recording to people's songs, I just have the studio monitors playing. I have my amp playing, and
because none of it matters. None of it's getting in the way, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll use the signal out of the amp, and sometimes I go with the J48. I don't know why. I think I don't even know if I could tell the difference between them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll sometimes go through the J48 and just like split it. But then I feel like I'm live in the room just playing it, and I don't have cans on or anything. And yeah, the nature of bass, I don't have to worry about bleed or anything.
It's perfect.
So it's just sometimes you fall into those things where you're like, this is simple. This cuts away a lot of the stuff I don't want to deal with, so I could really focus on what I like.
Yeah.
And it's unique. I mean, just being a guitar player would be a whole different world for this. You'd have to have a whole mic setup. It's funny how that's kind of
no,
works.
you don't.
Preamps and...
No, you don't. You just plug right in a guitar rig and do it all digitally.
Yeah. Really? What time? So are you guys getting good tone without miking your amps now?
Oh yeah, I think.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It was about time. Are you using those amp simulators?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So you guys, you know what? Like that convinces me that it works, because there are like a few people I think of when I think of like really knowing their gear. It's like you, Mike, and it's you, Al. Like you guys like really have invested in your tone. And if you're given the green light for the amp simulators and like the amp, those like tube pedals and stuff, that says it all. It means you don't need to do anything else.
Because I feel like also too, if you had $100,000 for recording gear, then sure,
you'll get your tone 2% better.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're like, if you're not going to have a super nice room, you're not going to have crazy expensive mics, you're not going to have preamp, you're not going to know where to place things, so you may want to change it afterwards. It's like direct in is just so much better.
I don't even consider myself someone who gets great guitar tones. Like when I hear the guitar tones coming in from Will, for example, Mike's brother Will, like they sound way better than what I can do. And that's also because he's just hit the way his hands hit the guitar, like the tone sounds a certain way. But even he is adopting he's using a thing called the aux box, which it's like a load box. You can plug your amp head into it, and then it's got a speaker simulator, and it just turns it into zeros and ones, I guess, when it hits your computer, and or however that works. But you know what it is for me, man? It's like I've never been a super picky guitar tone guy, for better or for worse, and I still think I have a lot to learn in that area. But it's the workflow, the fact that I can just I don't have to set. I mean, I'm in an apartment townhouse here. Like I couldn't plug an amp in and have that going. Like it wouldn't work. But also, I can just plug a guitar in, play. There's just one cable, and then I unplug that one, switch to my Les Paul, plug that in, flip to a different amp setting, just pull it up, just start turning knobs. Okay, it sounds good. Flip it to the other side. Now I got two guitar tracks done in like 15 minutes, you know? Whereas if you've got
You
an
can change it.
and then
Absolutely.
in post you can adjust the amp as if you were doing it in you know in the first place, and or switch everything, reamp it completely. So for me the workflow is unbeatable. And then I've got the Line 6 Helix actual unit, so if I wanted to use the processing for that, I would you wouldn't be able to change it after the fact, but even still.
What about all right, how about like the Fishman pickups and stuff for acoustic? How is that?
It's not. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
used it. I'll tell you where I used it. Is for we've done a few live quote unquote like isolation videos where like we'll each record our parts and then combine them later. I've used it for those because I'm also singing either lead or backup vocals at the same time, and the bleed. So what I'll do is I'll capture the pickup, I'll capture the vocal mic, and I'll put a 57 on the acoustic. But what happens is the bleed from my vocals to the 57 mic on the acoustic is so much that it's hard to get any real isolation. So,
Right.
but there is a little bit of bleed from my acoustic into the vocal mic. So that gives, when I process the vocal with EQ and brighten it up and stuff, that gives that life to the acoustic. And then the DI tone is fine. It's a little rubber bandy though. So, but the combination of those two seems
what
to
about
work
like
okay.
in the studio? So we're still not at the point where like the acoustic electric pickup.
No, I would never.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been times when I've gone into like Metalworks and like, yeah, we'll just take a DI off your acoustic guitar. I'm just like, well, there's no way we're ever. Okay, I'll tell you one time here's one time you can use the DI. So end of a song, you hit your last chord and you let it ring, right? And then you're listening back to the track and you just hear beep boop 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 beep. Boop,
Oh yeah,
boop, from the click
the metronome.
Yeah,
I've done that.
So the click bleed, right, coming out of the headphones. So here's what I've done. So I'll copy and paste the DI signal, and then do a very long crossfade between both parts. So it's literally the same chord. It's just a different signal, right? And you do a super long crossfade, and because the part that you miss the most.
So you'll never hear it. You'll never hear them change. But basically, as the volume of one goes up, the other
goes down. Yeah. So it can work. It doesn't always work, but the part that you miss the most with the DI sound is the actual pick on the strings. Like it just doesn't sound natural, right? It sounds like fling instead of like bring, nice and bright, right? So you get that energy and that transient from the mic, and then as the signal decays, the DI and the mic start to sound more similar. So you
what
can
about
actually
those like piezo pickups or something? Is that like are people using like two pickups on acoustic guitar where maybe one is capturing?
Oh yeah, they blend it in. I'm using same with you, Mike. The one I have is it's got a mic.
Who's Mike?
In it. Oops. We're all the same.
We're talking about Mike.
We're all one being. One consciousness. Sorry, totally got off track there. Mine is a microphone and it's the piezo.
Oh, nice.
Which I have no idea how to say that name. But I think yours is the same deal, isn't it, Al? It's like a pickup.
I don't even know what mine is. No, I mean I think it's just one thing.
Between the two,
it's underneath
so does that mic for you? For you, Mike, the real mic. Does that mic? So does that pickup mic setup like work better? Is it gets closer to using a condenser?
It's weird because the microphone's in the guitar, like in the acoustic, and it's fucking just muddy as fuck in there.
Yeah.
You know what I've always wondered is I feel like the next step to get there is if you acoustically treated the inside of your guitar. You know what I mean? Put sound absorption in there to get rid of some muddiness. I'm not going to do that. Maybe that'll be an official Music Guy podcast product we sell.
Because if you could if you could get that fixed so that you can get good tone as long as the room is like quiet-ish.
Yeah.
Just from like an onboard pickup or an attachment or something, then literally, you're at the point where the only thing is like tracking vocals. Obviously, horns will be a whole other thing.
There would have to be some
But,
kind
like,
of
other instruments.
impulse response or convolution, some kind of high-level technology to sort of duplicate that effect of the space around the guitar. But hey, man, I'm sure it's in the works.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it probably is. And there's probably some plugin that could literally make like a crappy acoustic tone.
Yeah.
sound
It's an impulse. What is it called? Is it
Impulse
response?
response. Yeah.
Yeah, they make impulse responses of the inside of a guitar, like they would of a room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can blend those in.
I
have
see
the
what
Helix,
you
and there's
mean.
no
I see
reason
what you
why I
mean.
haven't done that. Yeah.
Like you've captured
there's
the
no reason
sound of
why-
like you've captured the sound of a room as its
Yes.
own like thing, and then you're digitally adding the sound of the acoustic guitar to that digital room sound
It's
that
a
was
type of reverb.
captured.
Yeah.
I've like no one's done it that I know of with the Helix. But when I do get back to gigging, that is what I will try to do with acoustic. Try to get them impulse responses in there. Because it can do those.
So you have an impulse to like get on the impulse responses.
Oh, I got impulse. Got a bunch of wacky ideas.
Do you have to split for a lesson, Mike?
You have to split in 2 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's call it there. I mean, we've been going for a bit, but man, we could talk much longer about all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. We'll do
This
that
was
another day.
awesome, boys.
Thanks for coming on, Josh.
Come back on.
Great. Thank you for having me on. I'm gonna be sharing. So this will be released in like a week or something.
Yeah, I would think sometime next week. Yeah, we'll have it out.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Yeah, I would
I'm
definitely
behind on the
share it.
Instagram videos, but I'm gonna catch up.
So, where can people find you online, Josh, if they want to say hello or follow you or anything like that?
You'll get the music of joshcohen.com, facebook.com/the music of Josh Cohen, Instagram @the music of Josh Cohen. That's basically going to get you to everything. And looking forward to connect.
And look out for the new record Freedom coming August 21st.
Yeah, and transcription book.
And the transcription book.
I think if you're looking to learn, because a lot of bass players would be like, where do I fucking start? Learning this stuff. It's like
there it is.
just
It's all right there.
Maybe get some lessons with Josh. Maybe get the transcription book.
And Josh, for some lessons.
Yeah, you do Skype lessons as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Zoom.
Skype's so old school. MySpace. You can follow the podcast at Music Guy Podcast on Instagram as well as Twitter. And all the episodes, past and present, are available at musicguypodcast.com. You can find myself at Alro Music on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. You can find Mike at Bruno the Meek on Instagram. And you can check out some extra video content from our podcast on YouTube, Music Guy Podcast. Pardon me?
Oh, we got clips and stuff. I just totally ruined everything.
Yeah, we've got there's clips from past episodes, little highlights, and as well as some how-to videos and some behind-the-scenes stuff as well there. So if you like what you hear here, go on and check it out over there on YouTube as well. Thanks so much for listening to the show. If you want to support us, just tell your friends, because we love spreading the love to new people out there. And thanks again, Josh, for coming on the show. And we'll see everybody next week for another episode of the Music Guy Podcast. Woo-hoo. Bye for now. All right, cool. Sorry, I kind of blitzed through that. Josh peaced out.
Oh, he went away.
We lost him. Anyways, dude. All right, well, great job, man.
I'll send you. Oh, sorry. Actually, it's my turn to edit this week, so I will do that.
Okay.
What else was I going to say? I just